The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Grootes, 9 after 6. Glad you're along with us on The Money Show this evening. Obviously, the big number really is the fact that unemployment is still so high. And you'll hear from the statistician generally in just a moment. I mean, we all know it's been creeping up and everybody argues. And I kind of always feel we argue about the margins. We're not really arguing about what will really make a difference. There's so much to talk about. You'll hear that conversation in just a moment. There's plenty of other things going on at the moment. So there'll be the statistician general. You'll hear from Isaiah Mplanga on the same issue. I was fascinated, and I have a memory, actually, of sitting in the Eyewitness newsroom and interviewing the then head of the Competition Commission. I'm sure that audio's gone now. And they were so clear and so confident that the RAND manipulation case would be done and dusted in a few months. That was in 2017. I mean, their children have finished high school in that time. In fact, their children have finished primary school in that time. And yet the case is still here. And you look at the language the banks are using. I mean, they are utterly convinced that they are innocent. And normally, if you're the CEO of a bank, you couch things quite carefully. Here, the CEOs are like, no. We are innocent. Like, full stop. I mean, Sim Chabalala wrote an opinion piece. When did you see a bank CEO write an opinion piece? A couple of years ago about it. We won't settle, he said. Very dogmatic language. I look forward to the Constitutional Court case. Business Live reporting it's going to be held over 4 days. I don't think I've ever seen a court case go as long as that in the Constitutional Court. Home Affairs, they've signed a new deal with more banks to basically encourage and help people get their home affairs services in banks. One of the questions I'm fascinated by is, does it put much strain at all on the data resources of the banks? My guess is that it doesn't. I mean, I suspect actually that it probably doesn't, and that really it's just a little add-on and possibly a benefit to their customers. I'd love to know what we're going to use the Home Affairs offices for. I mean, the Minister, Leon Schreiber, says it'll free up the offices for other work. If you're not doing IDs and you're not doing passports, okay, so there's birth registrations. Those should often be done in hospitals. I suppose there's death registrations. What else is there? And I mean, I remember court cases where Home Affairs officials refused to work on a Saturday. Maybe there's a long-term plan that we're not aware of that's boiling here. Also, Parks Tau, the DTIC minister, and John Steenhuisen, the agriculture minister, talking about the sort of deal, the new deal they're submitting to the United States about trade. Quite interesting. I was quite intrigued by the fact that I think Steenhuisen was asked today by, I don't know who asked, essentially, you know, there are things like BE and expropriation, non-trade issues. I mean, should we give in on those? And he's saying, well, what would happen if we demanded the US give on something that's not a trade issue? I mean, I'm trying to imagine someone knocking on Donald Trump's door and saying, look, you want us to change our policy, you change yours. I mean, we all know how that's going to end. I thought that was a solid point. I saw today that the Gupta home, the Gupta, I don't even know what to call it, estate, the sort of Gupta part of Saxon World. It's finally sold for just 34.5 million rand. I think they wanted more for it. It's number 3, number 5, and number 7 Saxon World Drive. And I once popped my head in there once under strange circumstances. Didn't stay very long. What would you do to try and, I suppose, reclaim a home that had been used by the Guptas? What would you do? I mean, would you open, dare I say, a shebeen? Would you do something else? What would you do with it? Be very interested to hear from you. I know you'll have a view. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
Confirmation today from Statistics South Africa that on our current system of measuring unemployment, virtually 1/3 of those who want to work can't find a job. You don't need me to tell you this. You see people on the side of the road every day looking for work. The official unemployment rate is now 33.2%. Stats SA, as you know, is also introducing changes to the questionnaire it uses to assess how many people are working. The Statistician General is Rusenga Malaleke. Sir, good evening. Thank you for your time. Firstly, today's figures seem to confirm a trend we all know. Unemployment seems to be creeping up and younger people are being hit the hardest.
By all means, yes. And let me greet again the listeners and continue to say that indeed unemployment has been steadily rising over a period of time. We can look at where we were about a decade ago, about 5 years ago. By 2020, we were sitting at about 28, 29%, and now we are sitting at 33.2% as of the second quarter of 2025.
There's been a huge debate around the questions that you use, the definition of unemployment, the definition of employment. You're making some changes to the questionnaire. How big are those changes? I mean, do you see them as massive changes, or do you think they're quite sort of subtle changes?
Firstly is that we are members of an ILO-led initiative in terms of defining what employment is. And the simplest one being that anyone who, when we interviewed them, said they worked for a minimum of an hour a week prior to the interview, and they did so for purposes of making money or being paid, are considered employed. Now, having said so, the changes that we are making, or the additions that we are making in the questionnaire, are not meant to refine our methods in terms of changing the definition, but are more in collecting more data attributes. So if there are 10 people out there who are employed and 5 people out there who are unemployed, they will still remain the same, but we will be collecting more attributes in terms of the number of hours that they are working, so that we can look at issues like underemployment and the like.
So you're not expecting a big change in the number that you will announce every quarter?
Not really, because it's not meant to deal with defining what employment and unemployment is. It's just adding more attributes in terms of what we are collecting.
Does that also mean then that we will still be able to compare the previous the surveys you've done with the previous set of questions with the new set of questions? We will be comparing like with like when we start to get new data going forward.
By all means, we will be able to do so. One of the things that we do in line with collecting historic data is preserving what we call series. So when you have a series of information over a period of time, it is an unforgivable sin for any statistician in official practice to break series by not making users compare what was collected previously going forward.
Okay. There's been I made the point there's been a big debate about this, and I understand your point that you use an ILO definition. Do any of the changes, will they affect the quality of the data in any way? In other words, because you're only adding questions, you, I presume, are not removing questions. Does that mean then that our data set will still fit into the definition of the data set that the ILO uses? To put it another way, we will still be able to accurately compare our unemployment with Namibia's unemployment, with Germany's unemployment.
We have always been following ILO guidelines, and we do not seek in any way to exit from that, because if we were to exit from that, it would be very difficult. Obviously, different countries have other additions that they put. For example, the minimum year of entry into the labor force or into the working age does play a role. But otherwise, we should be able to compare with other countries, because we are not planning to make any changes in the method of collection. We are just adding attributes.
The changes that you're making, from what we see, came after the debate around informal employment. It's a debate we've had before, but in this case it was started by Gerrie Fourie as he was leaving Capitec. Were you planning to add these questions anyway, or was it only after that debate that you decided to add them?
We are not making changes in this regard. We are adding attributes that users will be able to benefit more information. So definitely there are no changes, number one. Number two is that we started with the quarterly labor force, with the labor force survey, which used to come once every 6 months, years ago, more than 2 decades ago. Since 2008, we have introduced the quarterly labor force survey, and we have been making additions in terms of the developments that we are picking up as we continue to meet with the ILO. So it's not a new thing, and it's not a question of what was raised by the former was CEO of Capitec, Gerrie Fourie. Even if he had never raised them, we would continue to make those improvements. And even in future, even if there's nobody who raises issues, as we discuss internationally with other bodies that deal with issues of employment, unemployment, we will continue to make those additions in terms of the work that we do.
Urisenga Maleleka, the Statistician General, thank you very much indeed for your time on The Money Show. Listening to that, Imameleng Mothebe, Chief Economist at Rand Merchant Bank. Good evening. I mean, from what the Statistician General says, we shouldn't really expect much change at all to our numbers when the new data sets come out.
Indeed, we look at these numbers, but we also look at many other countries when we do our relative analysis of where our economy is. And the methodologies are pretty much standardized precisely for comparability. So we think, StatSA is doing quite a phenomenal job. Yes, improvements continue. But also that is an international standard. Economic data gets revised, methodologies get revised, periodically as they become much more accurate in capturing the dynamics in the economy. So there isn't, anything that says to us we need to raise alarm bells on the methodologies that StatSA follows.
Is there any argument to make bigger changes to capture income rather than employment? I mean, there is, for example, G.G. Elcock brought this up last night, people who rent out back rooms. They don't work for anybody, but they have 3 or 4 people living on their property, and that's their income.
Look, I guess that is captured elsewhere in the compilation of national accounts, because that will be captured in the spending that people do with that income. From an employment perspective, it's simply, what StatSA does in the quarterly, labor force survey is to capture who is employed. But it doesn't mean that if you are not employed, you are not earning an income, to your point. That will be captured in other economic statistics, not necessarily in the employment dynamics, which is why when you look at the performance of the economy, you don't only look at employment, you look at income, to your point. Because that captures a different dynamic that is not captured in the employment statistics.
Imameleng Mothebe, thanks so much, Chief Economist at Rand Merchant Bank.
7:02. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
A series of reports in Business Live today detailing how some of the banks implicated in the Rand manipulation claims seem to be attacking the Competition Commission for including them on the list of banks that are implicated. Standard Bank, First National Bank, others say they're absolutely adamant they've done nothing wrong. They say the Commission has not been able to make a case against them. Kabelo Khumalo is the Companies and Markets Editor at Business Day. Kabelo, good evening. What kind of language are these banks using in their legal papers? What are they saying about the Commission's case?
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to your listeners at home. Some of the language that is being used by the banks is very colorful. I mean, for example, the likes of Standard Bank is describing this multi-year-long investigation on it by the Competition Commission as being amounting to torture, really. saying they feel that their reputation as a banking institution is being tarnished when the commission does not have a case to stand on. So they have literally asked the Constitutional Court to put them out of, in quotation marks, their misery really over the past 8 years or so.
The Competition Appeals Court's actually already found in favor of the banks, as I understand it. There must be a lot riding on this Constitutional Court case for the Commission. I mean, it could come out of this looking quite embarrassed.
Yeah, it's one of those, Stephen, that might be a winner takes all, really. Should the Concord, which is going to hear the matter next week, in an unprecedented, really, 4 days, over 4 days, we might leave the Competition Commission railing on the banks. It's a winner takes all, high stakes game, really, because the manipulation of the currency is a serious indictment. Should particularly the local banks be found to have participated in that.
This is where it all gets very messy. I mean, for some Tshabalala to have been so adamant in public that no one in his bank did anything wrong. I mean, if they find the other way, I mean, he is going to find himself in a complicated position. I mean, there's suddenly a lot riding on all of this.
There is a lot, but like you say, the Competition Appeal Court has already ruled in some of the bank's favors to say the evidence, the so-called evidence against them by the Commission is weak. I think Standard Bank is only implicated in one chat, which they say does not suffice to say is evidence that they participate in an overarching conspiracy to manipulate the rent. But the Competition Commission is adamant that the banks are using delay tactics and the legal processes to delay answering to what they believe is a strong case against them. It's a very complex case that has been going on for many years. And on the other hand, the international banks claim that the South African authorities don't have jurisdictions over them, which also is, I think, is going to be quite important on how the Concord rules on that, because it seems like a funny, for a layman at least, it looks like a funny argument to claim that you can be implicated for wrongdoing in a certain jurisdiction, but the authorities in that jurisdiction don't have a claim. They cannot lay claim to you. I think it's one of those that are going to be test our laws to say what is the responsibility of international corporations doing business in South Africa and be found wanting. What is the liability that they, at least on the jurisdiction front, that SA authorities have on them?
Kabelo Kumalo, thanks very much indeed. Companies and Markets Editor at Business Day.
The Money Show.
The Markets.
Anthony Modasani is a senior equity sales trader at ABSA CIB. Anthony, good evening. Welcome back to the Money Show. Been a little while. Sasol's share prices up dramatically today, over 10%. A very strong trading update.
Yeah, Stephen, thanks. Good to be back. It's been a while. It's quite interesting price action in Sasol's share price today. I mean, there were a couple of one-offs in that number that some of the analysts, I think, that cover the stock did take into account, but there are quite a few that didn't. So perhaps, dressed up, the market did sort of expect that headline figure, in terms of what they've guided to come in at. But, I think guys were just excited about maybe what was a little bit of an upbeat trading statement.
Quite a lot going on in the telco space. I mean, Vodacom signed a deal. MTN seems to be on a little bit of a rally at the moment. There was strong results from Nigeria a couple of weeks ago, quite good results from, was it Uganda earlier?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, I think, we've had Ghana, Nigeria, now Uganda. They've all reported a solid set of numbers. We had the Airtel Africa and Vodacom announce that they're partnering on infrastructure in Mozambique and a couple of other places. So that's been quite positive for the sector. We've seen MTN also announce something similar with Airtel Africa in regions where they both operate. So, it's a bit of a collaborative effort, which is quite positive. In those regions, sometimes it's quite difficult to manage infrastructure, and from a cost perspective also, it can hurt them. So, it just seems like that's given some positive sentiment to the TMT sector at this point in time.
Financials were up again today. A Standard Bank report, I think, later this week. ABSA on Monday. I mean, there's suddenly quite a lot going on in this space.
Yeah, so I mean, banks have really the sector's felt really dead for the past month and a bit. So like, we had Nedbank come out, I think it was a week and a bit ago. That stock was down 6% and a bit. And now you've got Standard Bank and the Big Red Bank coming out next week. So I think investors are starting to get a bit excited about it. Maybe there's a bit of near-term opportunity to put some money to work in that sector. So hopefully we can deliver.
The JSE All Share closing above 101,000 for the first time today. And I get the sense that this kind of momentum seems almost unstoppable for the moment if you consider all of the geopolitics at the moment. It almost doesn't make sense, but it does if you think about it.
Yeah, quite true. I mean, the retailers have really struggled for momentum. So when you look at what we term the SA Inc. names, they've been a bit lackluster. But I mean, when you've got so many mining stocks and the gold stocks and the platinum group metal stocks, they've performed really well, and they've held us up quite nicely. Also, like the telco stocks and your Naspers and Process have also done pretty well. So, it's a rising tide lifting all boats at this point in time.
In the US, inflation there pretty much in line with what was expected. That would open the door for a rate cut from the Fed, and if there isn't, it'll open the door to a tirade on Twitter from Donald Trump.
I see you already got a tongue lashing from Trump saying that he's gonna consider proceeding with legal action against Trump for something along the lines of the building, one of the Fed buildings that he's overspent on. It's a shame. Wouldn't want to be in his shoes. But yeah, so the inflation print was in line. The market was nervous that it was going to come in a bit higher, which would put the Fed off looking to cut interest rates. So now it feels like the door is open. You had a sort of orderly reaction in the US markets to it. So hopefully we see a rate cut come through at September.
Anthony Modasani, thanks so much. Senior equity sales trader at ABSA CIB.
WhatsApp Stephen
On 072
702
1702.
Well, I was pointing out earlier that the Gupta, still don't know what to call it, estate, villa, compound, the villa section of Saxonwold, something, sold for only 34.5 million rands. 3 particular addresses on Saxonwold Drive. What would you do with it, was my question.
Hi, Stephen. My suggestions on what to do with the Gupta compound is to have an institute of governance right there.
There's something to that. There's so many thoughts about what you could do with property that was once owned by the Guptas.
702 with Stephen Grootes.
Email him on stephen@702.co.za.
We've all been talking about the car industry recently, and in some ways, I think sort of leading memorial services for the car industry because, so much is going on that just seems to be going in the wrong direction. Well, not for Mahindra. They've said they're going to increase their production of bakkies in Durban by around 2/3. They'll go from sort of 700 or so to around 1,500. And what this really tells you is how important cost is. It's all about price. Mahindra's bakkies are probably sort of towards the cheaper end, and that's what people will buy. And it really does explain to you. I mean, for years and years and years, as long as I can remember, the highest selling car in South Africa has also been the cheapest car in South Africa. You can go back to, when it was a Taz, when it was a Suzuki. Before that, it was a Golf. For years and years and years, you saw Golfs. A Polo, I mean, it's always been the way. And it really does just explain where we are with car prices. So I was glad to see Mahindra clearly believe there is a market. It's not just for us, also for Mozambique, they say. And they're able to keep going. Fascinating to see someone swimming against the tide. And Tebbles messaged us today saying, Home Affairs has opened on many a Saturday. I think there was a context on the refusal to work on a Saturday at the time. And look, there was. Workers were asked to work on Saturdays, then they were rostered to work on Saturdays. They refused, off to court they went. And the point I'm still making, though, is if you're lucky enough in a country with 33% unemployment, if you're lucky enough to have a government job, I think you should maybe be a little flexible to work on a weekend. I'll tell you this, I work in the private sector, and I've done it so many times, simply because I'm, lucky enough to be working. So I think that maybe, ask yourself this question. When did you last walk past a library that was open on a Saturday, and why isn't it?
702. Stephen is on the Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Well, confirmation this week from the Home Affairs Minister, Leon Schreiber. He's expanding the partnership with some of our banking groups. You'll be able to access Home Affairs services with many more branches of FNB and Capitec. Basani Malaleke is the Capitec Group Executive of Personal Banking. Basani, good evening. What kind of services are you going to be providing? Will they be sort of quicker and easier than some of the Home Affairs services we saw at other banks?
Good evening, Stephen, and thank you for having me. We are very excited to be launching this initiative with the Department of Home Affairs. The intention here is to start by making available the ability for clients to walk into our branches and apply for a digital ID card and have that delivered to their home in due course, but initially delivered to our branches for them to collect. The intention here being that currently the ministry has only about 300 offices across the country that can do this, and there are about 100 others that are around the country, but clients can't go in, or rather South Africans can't go in and get these digital cards. So we're going to start by making sure that the branches that are close to these areas where the department does not have those capabilities are able to assist South Africans to get their digital ID cards from our branches.
Up until now, and I think it is still the case as I talk to you now, if you want to do this with a bank, you have to still make the booking and pay on the Home Affairs website. Take it from me, that's a little bit of a pain. It may have improved. Is that going to change? Would you be able to do it on the Capitec website or the Capitec app, or just by going into the branch?
In due course, we want to have the ability to do it on the app, but at the beginning, when we start in October with our first 10 branches, which will be more of a pilot or a soft launch, the intention is that any client can walk into any of those 10 branches, apply on our self-service devices. So these are the standalone device where a client can just go, log in with their biometric and make that application. To the extent that they need to take a picture, they can take a picture right there in our branch and then complete their application. The client will be accountable, though, for the fee that the department will charge for the card itself. But our intention is not to earn a margin on that transaction. Our intention is to ensure that we remove friction from the process, as you've described earlier, and to make sure that there are more points where clients can apply for these cards and collect them.
You, as a bank, as Capitec, have a huge amount of infrastructure. You move information around. You do it very safely, very securely, which is why banks have been asked to do this in the first place. Does it actually cost you much in resources? I mean, do you pretty much have all the network and stuff that you need anyway?
I think that's the beauty of it as well, Stephen. The fact that we do have this very broad, very wide branch infrastructure, so 880 branches, well over 1,000 of these self-service devices I've just mentioned where clients can make these applications is incredible. And of course, we've got 13.5 million clients, over 13.5 million clients who use our app. So the distribution network that we have makes us uniquely positioned to be able to reach many clients, remove friction, and obviously by so doing, you also reduce the overall cost to the system, because clients are no longer having to drive to Home Affairs and wait in queues and all the rest of it. So I think by us taking this on, we make South Africans better off, and of course create additional capacity for the DHA to do other work, which is value-adding for South Africans.
No, sure. Is it just your clients, or would anyone be able to do it?
At the beginning, it will certainly just be our clients until we can make sure that we've understood the volumes that this will require. Once we've understood the pressures that this will put on government printing as well. So the intention is to learn in the first year, let's call it that, and thereafter to look at what other opportunities there are for people who are not our clients.
And people who aren't your clients will be in your branch, surrounded by your advertising. I mean, it's going to be quite useful to you in a way, isn't it, Pisani?
I mean, Stephen, I must tell you, I struggle to understand why not all South Africans bank with us, because we really are quite spectacular.
Pisani Maluleke, thanks very much indeed. I feel the same about the Money Show. Pisani Maluleke is the Group Executive of Personal Banking at Capitec.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM, streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
A couple more suggestions for what to do with the compound or the Gupta home. Someone suggesting a corruption museum. Someone else just cynically saying, look, there'll be a new development at which the favored few will benefit. I mean, there's certain things that you could link it to. There's a Museum of Military History. I don't know if you could link it to the zoo in some way. I don't know if the geography works, but it's not far from the zoo. There's something to it. I used to very briefly live in that area, rented there until the house I was living in burnt down rather dramatically and unnecessarily, I suppose. And from time to time, you could actually hear lions roaring at night. It was quite something. Your thoughts? I know you'll have one. What to do with the Gupta compound? 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. It's 6 minutes to 7.
702.
702.
Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
I can't imagine what it's like to try and negotiate with the Trump administration at this point, but there were a series of measures announced today by the DTIC Minister Parkstown, the Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen, their response to the US tariffs. At the same time, Tau confirming government has submitted a new offer to the US to try and reduce the 30% tariffs that are currently being charged on our goods on entry into the US. At the same time, of course, the meat industry has been dealing with all sorts of issues that involve trade and more recently foot and mouth disease. Imameleng Mothebe is the CEO of the Association of Meat Importers and Exporters. Imameleng, good evening. You want what are called regionalisation agreements with other countries. As I understand it, that would mean that if KwaZulu-Natal gets a case of foot and mouth disease, the Eastern Cape and Gauteng and Limpopo can still export beef. How important is this whole issue to your industry at the moment?
Thank you, Stephen, and good evening to the listeners. Regionalization is a concept that is beginning to be globally accepted by all meat trading countries, specifically because it looks like diseases are part of the global trading environment. So imagine if everyone was to close because there's an outbreak in one province of the country. The engagement that the U.S. has entered into with South Africa now is exactly regionalization that we're speaking to, where certain states have diseases, then products will not come from that, but will not stop products coming in from states that are not affected. So that is where globally the meat trade sector is moving to, and that's why we're urging government as well to swiftly move into that mode. And as the association, we stand ready to support those initiatives by government.
Who decides where it is safe to sell the beef from? Let me just sort of put that slightly better. If, for example, we have an outbreak in KwaZulu-Natal, do we get to decide, well, we can sell beef from the Eastern Cape, even though they're next to each other? Or does the country we want to sell it to decide?
On the type of agreement that South Africa has with the respective country. In certain instances, yes, there will be arrangements that segregates the affected province from the rest of the country, and therefore trade can still continue. But where we don't have those kind of arrangements, then and there's an outbreak anywhere, it closes the whole country until the disease is eradicated. So it's solely dependent on the agreements existing between the two countries. So that's why we're saying we would rather move to having this type of arrangements, both with our importing partners and with our exporting partners, because globally that's where trends are moving to.
So, I mean, I completely understand it. It makes complete economic sense. It's all fine until someone goes a little too far, and some diseases like foot and mouth or avian influenza, to use another example, literally move with the wind. Is there not a slightly greater risk in doing it this way? I mean, there's a reason why we had it sort of country by country before.
Stephen, there are systems that the countries put in place. Like in South Africa, we've got systems in place that measure all these issues in terms of what is happening where, and our systems are able to pick that up. I think what we'd rather be talking about is improving on what we have to ensure that we have viable and reliable systems to ensure that we are able to pick up on these issues as and when they happen. Globally, when you have diseases, countries declare themselves at the World Organization of Animal Health in terms of whatever the disease is. Once you have eradicated that, there's protocols and processes to follow, but you submit the documentation that indicates what you have done, and then that you have actually the disease has been cleared, and therefore you are given a certain time frame to get back into trade. So this systems is not a South Africa issue, it's a global issue.
Everyone's been talking about trying to access other markets. Are you trying to access other markets? I mean, there's some where it'll just make no sense. I can't imagine trying to sell South African beef in Argentina. They'll probably feel insulted. Are there other markets that we can look at?
Yes, Stephen. I think if you look at the trade data, the stats indicate a significant growth in especially beef exports for South Africa. It's because of the quality of the product that we produce. Interestingly, in our discussions with Brazil a few months ago, they were also indicating an interest to import beef from South Africa, because the type of beef we produce in South Africa would be different from the type of beef that they produce. And our product is more your younger animals that have got soft, tender, juicy. So that's why globally the demand is growing for our product. So yes, we're not looking to sell into each and every region, but we're looking at niche markets where we can make the most impact in terms of global trade.
Imameleng Mothebe, thanks very much indeed, CEO of the Association of Meat Importers and Exporters. We'll talk about skills for younger people and a skills ecosystem in the green economy. We'll have an update from the rest of our continent over the next half hour. Don't forget Warren Ingram and the sandwich generation on personal finance. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
8 minutes after 7. Good evening. Lots coming up in the next little while. We'll be talking to the CEO of the National Business Initiative. They're setting up what they call a skills ecosystem for people in the green economy. Quite an important thing if you think about it. And you think about how our economy is changing. Dr. Rotendo Ndungi, he's already here, preparing to talk to you in a couple of moments. He'll update you on what's happening in our continent. And I know you will want to listen to Warren Ingram tonight. You might want to go back tomorrow and listen to it if you miss it as a podcast. But he's talking about the South African sandwich, what to do when you support your children and your parents. And I made this point earlier on the show, and someone immediately responded. And when you're looking after your children's children as well, because many people do, and it really does get to the bottom of how difficult financial life is sometimes for so many people. So I thought that was a very interesting point. We'll be talking about all of that a little later. You might well be someone in that position. I'd like to hear your experiences, please. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM, streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
I made the point earlier that I think it must just feel sometimes almost impossible to negotiate around trade with the Trump administration. It's very difficult to know how you approach them. What do you do? Do you give in? Do you not? And I think the only approach you can sort of take is to think, how's this going to look in 10 years' time? And you have no idea. I mean, that's the other problem, is you really just don't know how it's going to look in 10 years' time, because so many different things are happening. I mean, he could still, people like him could still be in power. He might be out of power soon. Who knows? The trade policy might change completely, might stay exactly the same. The world might have been divided into very different blocks, if you like. I think that's what makes it so difficult. What we do know, and what we have known for a very long time, in my view, is that trade between countries makes them both richer. And if you stop that, you too are going to suffer. I think we can certainly say that. I know you'll have a view.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
The green economy on The Money Show. Well, the African Development Bank now giving a grant of $1 million to the National Business Initiative to help develop what they call a skills ecosystem in the green economy for younger people. Shamila Subramani is the CEO of the National Business Initiative. Shamila, good evening. What are you doing with this grant? How are you going to develop this ecosystem?
Good evening, Stephen and the listeners. Thank you. Great to be here this evening. So we're using the grant really to start to look at how we can develop that skills ecosystem and predominantly understand where those opportunities lie. How do we ensure that we have a skills system that is able to deliver the types of skills that we know are going to be needed in the transition that's already happening in our economy? So the key things that we want to look at, firstly, of course, is the groundwork on understanding what sorts of jobs we're looking at, where those are likely to be located, and how we can start to build the skills ecosystem now to ensure that we're able to deliver into the space that we can already see is changing and is aligned with growth opportunities and energy security for the country.
Do we have an idea of what some of those skills might be? And whenever you see a report about this on the web somewhere, Shamila, you'll see a picture of someone putting up a solar panel on a roof. I mean, it's got to be more than that, right?
Absolutely, Stephen. Unfortunately, that has been sort of the picture that we see everywhere. So certainly, yes, we are looking at opportunities in renewable energy, but also green manufacturing, low carbon transportation, energy efficiency, sustainable agriculture. I think, the definition of green is not sort of clearly definitive across the board, but by and large, we can look at those things across the board that contribute towards the decarbonization and low carbon growth into the future. So yes, it's not just the solar panel.
Do you know, I'm guessing that most of those skills would be in the big urban centers because that's where people are and jobs are. Would that be correct in this ecosystem too? You would be targeting the bigger cities.
So yes and no, Stephen. So if we want to talk about a transition that is just, I think we have to be deliberate about understanding that the benefits of the green economy are equitably distributed and accessible to all South Africans, and particularly in marginalized communities. So whilst we can't get away from the fact that certainly the bigger centers will attract a lot of the investment and the jobs, largely because they just have the infrastructure and, it makes it easier. But if we don't intentionally look at the issues around equity, we're just going to repeat the development trajectory we've had in the past. So we're prioritizing locations that have higher unemployment, especially in rural and historically marginalized areas. We're also setting inclusion targets for women, youth, and underrepresented groups in our training programs. And beyond the training, working with employers and industry bodies to address those barriers to entry, whether those are transport costs to workplace readiness, so that participants can actually take up the jobs being created, not just to grow that economy, but ensure that it's inclusive from the ground up. Part of that, I think, is understanding the localization opportunities and how do we take some of those localization opportunities and localization of value chains into some of these areas that have been excluded. It has to be deliberate because a just transition is not going to happen by itself. And so we're trying to understand how best to do that. One of the key entry points absolutely are the TVET colleges. We know that the technical skills system in the country has been a point of,
sure.
concern.
You don't need to finish the sentence.
No.
Yeah.
But they also provide a huge opportunity because of where they're located. And, naturally within a lot of communities that are actually marginalized and yet provide for us a really good space to try to start to build that system differently to meet the needs of the economy and start to really achieve the equity that we know needs to be deliberately planned into our economy.
Okay. I get all of that and I accept all of that. Are we looking at specific types of job that I can imagine right now that are not just solar panels? So would we be what kind of job would we be looking at? I imagine some of them will be sort of technician type jobs in different ways, perhaps.
So yes. So absolutely. And then you started off, jobs as solar and wind technicians, certainly. But electricians, working on green retrofits, manufacturing specialists for renewable components, and even entirely new career paths like electric vehicle maintenance and possibly manufacture. The key is to ensure that young people are equipped with those right skills to step into the roles as they emerge, but also understand that we will have transversal skills that are needed that you wouldn't traditionally think of as green skills. Problem solving, adaptability, digital literacy, to ensure that young people can grow with the sectors, but also understanding that sectors themselves will evolve over time. And so an agile skill space is really what we need to look to.
Shamila, thanks so much. Shamila Subramani is the CEO of the National Business Initiative.
The Money Show, Africa Business Focus.
Dr. Rotendo Ndwingi, founding director of Tribe Africa Advisory and author of the book Rumble in the Jungle Reloaded, joining us once again. Nice to see you, Rotendo. Singapore looking at deepening its business ties with Africa. What are they trying to do? Are they trying to trade like everybody else?
They're trying to trade like everybody else. And a good evening to you, Stephen, and your listeners. Singapore, from an economy perspective, just comparing with South Africa, has got a GDP of more or less the same, $500 billion US. So what is the difference? Their GDP per capita is $90,000 as compared to South Africa, which is $6,000. So there's a bit of money there, and it's good to have friends in Singapore. They've invested close to about actually $20 billion US over the last few years in Africa. A lot of it has gone into infrastructure, urban services. But a big thing that brings IP from Singapore, Stephen, is that the smart city capability. They're probably one of the first countries in the world in terms of rankings. So the bilateral deals, which amount to about 10 with Africa and 14 avoidance double taxation agreements, create a strategic opportunity for South Africa, or not South Africa only, but Africa, to partner with Singapore with regards to investment and trade. Some of the key areas they're also trading with Africa, Stephen, is Ghana and Rwanda in the area of carbon credits, because that market is also opening up. So there's a big summit coming up in August 26th to the 28th, the Africa-Singapore Business Forum, and again another opportunity for South Africa.
It's a city trading with a state, man. City trading with a continent. The Singapore Africa Forum.
Very true. But some big companies that have headquartered themselves in Singapore, targeting the Asian market, Sasol, Timebag, Sonangol from Angola. So I think with all the dynamics that's happening in the world, it's one sort of country or city that is worthwhile partnering up with regards to strategic trade and investment.
A reminder, the Africa Business Focus is brought to you by ABSA Business Banking. Talk business with the bank that gets it. ABSA Business Banking. And then Kenya's tea exports, they've been soaring. So look, we know Brazil has had problems producing enough coffee. The coffee price has gone through the roof. It'll take more than that to move me to tea. I mean, I'll drink it sometimes, maybe twice a year or so. But their exports are soaring.
The exports are sorry, they're having a bit of an impact negatively because of the obviously Russia and Ukraine. One of their key markets is Russia. Their biggest market is actually Pakistan. But just to give you some statistics there again, Stephen, there are about 5 million people involved with regards to employment within the value chain of tea in Kenya. It's the third largest tea producer after India and China. The production has grown 24% to 570 million tons from 2019 to 2023. So there's a significant amount of growth that's there. 81% of their exports go to Pakistan, Egypt, UK, UAE, Middle East, and China. And I think the big thing that's challenging them, and which is a thing that is happening across Africa, Stephen, is that 40% of the farming production of tea in Kenya comes from multinationals. 60% is smallholder farms. And the challenge with this is that these smallholder farms battle with regards to scaling, with regards to investing in technology, and also producing and competing competitively globally. So although there's an opportunity for growth, the biggest challenge is scaling and going to the next level. But ultimately, tea is a big contributor of GDP to the Kenyan market.
And then in the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Madagascar and Togo, the African Development Bank Group, they've approved this grant to look at strengthening public-private partnerships. That's quite interesting.
It is, and these are small countries, but I think the reason it stuck out, and if you look at the grant that was approved, Stephen, it's about $5 billion. So in the bigger scope of things, it's not a lot. But when you look at the GDPs of Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Madagascar, and Togo, they are small countries, but ultimately they position themselves in terms of differentiating with regards to attracting investment. And the African Development Bank has specifically given this investment with regards to promoting private investment. And it's in three key areas: to strengthen the private-public partnerships, to enhance private sector participation in those countries, and as well as effecting project management capability to ensure things are delivered. So although the economies are small in terms of their locations and where they represent, there's an opportunity for them to position themselves uniquely and provide value to the continent. Rwanda has done it. It's a small country, but making significant impact in the region. And I think this is the right direction with regards to just diversifying the economies of Africa for investors, not just from an African perspective, but even from a global perspective, Stephen.
And then rice. I mean, you don't necessarily immediately think of Africa as a sort of big rice exporter. You think of India, you think of other parts of Asia, and yet it's actually a very important crop.
It is a very important crop. Just to give you another statistic there, Stephen, Africa imports about 16 million tons of rice per annum. So that's about 60% of what we consume. And that's a big number. Why is this? Because we actually have got the capability to actually grow on rice. The challenge is that we don't have the skills and the capability. Smart Valleys is an innovative model that has been produced and has been supported by Japanese firms as well. And really what it allows African farming communities to do, especially in the waterlogged areas, it allows them to enhance their capability and the productivity by about 125% with regards to producing and growing rice. So that's exciting. And I think the reason for that, Stephen, is that rice, obviously as an alternative to a staple food, can actually contribute significantly to the African continent. Ivory Coast, Benin, Togo, Liberia, Sierra Leone are some of the countries that have embraced this smart technology, and it's been funded by the Gates Foundation, World Bank, Islamic Development Bank. So there's significant opportunity of just converting a large part of the land in Africa, which is not arable land. I think it's estimated that Sub-Saharan Africa has 190 million hectares of arable land for rice, but only 10% is being cultivated. So you can imagine the opportunity and the quantum that is there to actually reduce this huge importation of rice and actually grow it for ourselves and demand. I think one of the big snags that also has happened is India, which we used to supply a lot of the rice in Africa. But I think around 2023 stopped exporting significantly to other African countries because they say, look, we've got 1 billion people, we need to feed our own people. So that has created a sort of inward focus with regards to rice and rice production in Africa, which is good and bad, but ultimately, hopefully, we leverage off that in the right way.
Rutendo, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Dr. Rutendo Ndwingi is founding director at Tribe Africa Advisory and author of Rumble in the Jungle Reloaded. Running a business? Absa Business Banking gets it. The pressure, the pace, the risk, that's all on you. You need more than banking. You need flexible funding, real-world tools, and sector expertise that shows up when it matters. But most of all, you need a banking partner that gets it. So talk business with Absa Business Banking because they get it. Your story matters. Absa is an authorized FSP and registered credit providers. T's and C's apply.
The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Warren Ingram, of course, is a certified financial planner at Galileo Capital. I don't know if you had a sandwich for lunch, but there might be times when you feel like you're kind of the filling in the sandwich. And we're talking tonight about a South African sandwich that you see all too often when you have to support your children and your parents. Warren, good evening. I mean, there are many people in this position. Many people are members of families in this position.
And it's it feels like a South African story. We even hear the phrase black tax and we think it's, unique to our country because of our history, but it is something that affects families around the world. The consequences for families who are in this situation are sometimes very dire. We look at it's sorry to start on a depressing note, but if you look at the suicide rate of young people entering the workplace, the age group 21 to 35, it's probably the highest grouping in South Africa of people committing suicide. And unfortunately, salaried earners are often, the worst victims of suicide. And it's because of one of the reasons, is surely not the only reason, it's a complex situation, but one of the reasons is the tremendous need for them to try and support their families and, whether it's parents, grandparents, and potentially their own children. And it's sometimes feels like an overwhelming and impossible task that they have to bear, and sometimes very lonely because they find no way out, no one to talk to and no one to help them.
So I suppose let's just talk a little bit about how we got here. I mean, why are we in this position? So we understand our history. Are there particular things that have happened in the last sort of 10, 20 years that have intensified this?
some of it's, positive demographic trends that are having unfortunate consequences. So one of them is that South Africans in general are having children a little bit later. So where we might have, kind of had kids much younger, we now see, especially working families, having children a bit later. And that's sensible from a financial planning point of view on the one side, but it has a consequence, which is you find parents having to, fund education costs for their children, especially if their children get into tertiary institutions as well, where they're still funding education well into their own retirement. So in the time when you should be accumulating capital, in the last few years of your working career, you're still paying for, school and university, and then when you are retired and you've only got expenses and no income, you're in a situation where you're still helping your children to get through varsity and often help them, just survive the first few years of work when salaries are incredibly low. So that's the one thing. The other is life expectancy. It's no secret that we're all living much longer than we did, 20, 30, 50 years ago. And that, that's great for those of us that can afford to live longer. But if you're funding your parents or grandparents and they're living, instead of, passing away or dying at the age of 70, they're now dying at the age of 85, that's a very long time to keep funding them. And so those two on their own are huge demographic trends which are accelerating. So, we are all living longer and we will live longer, and then we're having children later. So just off the bat, Stephen, those are two of the big ones.
We're taking your questions for Warren Ingram tonight, and I know you'll have them. You might well be a member of the sort of sandwich generation. You might be someone who is being helped by someone in the middle of this sandwich. 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567. This must put a huge amount of pressure on the people who are actually earning the salary, Warren. And I'm not just talking about financial pressure. I'm talking about everything. I mean, it's your parents and it's your children. It's the people you love the most, generally speaking.
And very often, add to that, kind of extended family where there are nephews, nieces, aunts, uncles who might be desperately in need of help. And so you're right. The pressure is enormous, and it's not. We see it in the consequence, which is financial. We can measure something on the other side, but I think if you talk to psychologists, they'll tell you that this is just incredible pressure. And if you think about yourself as it was a long time ago for me, but as a 21 or 22-year-old self, entering the workplace, and knowing that I could barely, take care of myself, and actually just get up in the morning and get to work. Add to that now the pressure of making sure that there is money left at the end of every month to look after your parents, to look after your siblings, and if you've got young children yourself, to make sure that they're getting looked after as well. So entering the workplace is already tough. Just getting a job is hard, and then you add this pressure to it, and the emotional consequences are enormous. And I think it's very difficult to say to somebody, who raised you, look, I need to pay my rent. So the fact that you need food, I'm just going to pay my rent. How on earth does a young adult make a decision like that? And parents, young parents as well, would be saying, I've got to provide for my children. I've got to give them the best education they can get so they can get a start in life. And maybe one broader one, which is, what will people think? What will my family think if I say no? If I can't help? And so there is so much, immediate pressure, and then the kind of wider societal pressure on people in this position. It's, I think it's a tough gig, this.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a lot of social pressure here too, because, we all know who is related to who's part of the Grootes family or whatever. And that can sometimes mean that you kind of feel you need to help out just to make sure that they, that everybody sort of looks in the way they should. Keeping up appearances is a real issue.
It is, and often that broader community did what they could do while you were at school or getting to university to help you and to contribute to your success. And so when you do get a job, and especially if you end up working, in a company with a big name that everybody knows, and it doesn't matter what the job is, you could be, packing groceries for a retailer, or being a credit clerk at a bank. It doesn't matter what the job is. If you're the first person to enter the formal workspace in your family, the salary that you're earning just seems like this phenomenal amount of money, as if you've won the lottery. And so the expectation, to then get help from you is real. And as you say, very often, your immediate community wants to share in that success and wants to see you achieving. So it's such a complex issue, and we add a little bit of the additional economic pressure that we're seeing in South Africa, where unemployment is not in any way, shape, or form good, and it seems to me, if anything, it's getting worse. So you find people entering the workspace, making a go of it, and then potentially losing their jobs. And so this pressure just continues to build on younger people. Older people generally a little bit more kind of, able just to deal with this from an emotional maturity point of view, and maybe a little bit more economic security if they're earning a bit more and have a bit of experience under the belt. But it's the youngsters that start with the workplace that kind of get trapped very quickly.
A reminder, your questions for Warren Ingram, 011 8830702 and 0214460567. Are there some warning signs when actually you're getting in too deep, and this is sort of why? I mean, are there certain moments when you need to realize this is what's happening?
Yeah, I think if you're living in this, it's often, it might be easy for an outsider to see that you've got issues, and might be easy for an outsider to kind of pinpoint where you're going wrong, and it often is a source of shame when you're struggling with money and you can't make ends meet for yourself and then take care of everyone around you. But I think, maybe a couple of things that you can just do a kind of a health check for yourself. And one is, if you're borrowing money, so if you're borrowing money on your credit card, on a personal loan or an overdraft or from a microlender, and the reason you're borrowing that money is to support your family members, let's say older or younger, that's a real red flag for you. That should be kind of, warning sign number one. It means that you're already in trouble. You're already in a debt trap that you've got to be very careful that you don't let it get bigger. So I think, that's signal number one. Signal number two would be that you're not funding your own retirement. And so, if you've decided, if your company allows you to determine how much you retire, you contribute to your retirement fund, and you've stopped contributing to your retirement fund to support family members. And I'm not talking about feeding your own children or, just getting, if you're a couple as a husband and wife or spouses that you're just trying to get through the month. I'm talking about when you're supporting nephews, nieces, parents or grandparents, and you're stopping retirement contributions for that reason, to support them, then you need to know that's a red flag. It's maybe not as bad as borrowing money. And then the one which really is scary is when you start using your credit card for family emergencies, when someone phones you and says, your niece is going to hospital and she needs help. Can you please get there? And you, the only way you help is on a credit card.
Sure. Are there particular actions you need to take? And particularly just you need to actually sort of try not to nip this in the bud because they're your family, but to try and sort of take preventative or preparatory action to prepare for it?
Yeah, my best analogy I can think of for someone in this situation is when you get on an airplane and you actually take, the 2 or 3 minutes to listen to the safety briefing from the airline staff. One of the things they're going to tell you is if there is a problem with the oxygen on the airplane, those oxygen masks will drop out from the top. And they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself and make sure that it is working and that you can breathe before you consider helping anybody else. And to just think about that for a second. So it would be instinctive for someone to look after their loved one first. But if you run out of oxygen and you pass out, then you're not helping anybody, including your loved one. In fact, you become another victim. And so it's not selfish behavior to put that oxygen mask on yourself and make sure that you are able to then, look at the person in the seat to the left or the right of you or in front or behind and say, okay, who can I help first? Who's most in need of help? And if you're able to breathe and you're able to function, yes, you'll be stressed, but if you can then use your resources to help people for as much time as you possibly can. And bringing this back to money, this is the key point to understand. It's not selfish behavior to make sure that you're okay. I'm not saying that, necessarily that you're now going to live a life of luxury, but just looking after yourself, just making sure that you can get through the month, that you're not building up a huge debt pile is incredibly important, because if you want to be of help to those around you, the loved ones that are important to you, you want to do that for many years, decades if you can. And, if you start and you're in a debt problem immediately and you build up credit card and personal loans and all those things, the reality is you're going to be stuck in a huge debt problem yourself, and then you'll be someone in need of help. And you won't be able to help anybody because you'll be stuck in a huge amount of debt yourself. And this is a huge trap that a lot of our South Africans are in. So number one, take care of yourself. Make sure that you are just able to get by. And remember, you can't sacrifice your long-term financial future. If you don't want to be a burden on your children, it means that you have to set aside some retirement contributions so that when they become adults, they're not looking at you and saying, I've now got to help you as well. You should be able to take care of yourself. It's the most loving thing you can do is make sure that you're sustainable, and then you can sustainably support the people around you without becoming a burden on them at some point in the future.
We're taking your questions for Warren Ingram and personal finance tonight on 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567. Peter's asking Warren tonight, how much money should I allocate to a potentially risky investment that could grow my wealth quickly? We'll have an answer, Peter, in a moment.
The Money Show.
Personal finance with Warren Ingram.
Talking about the sandwich when you're looking after the generation after you and the generation before you financially. But Peter's question from Warren Ingram tonight. How much money should I allocate to a potentially risky investment that could grow my wealth quickly? Warren, I wonder if the answer to Peter's question is, how much money can you lose?
It's a very good starting point to a conversation like this. If you'd asked me this question 10 or 15 years ago, I would have said to Peter, don't waste your money. Don't do this. Rather, allocate it to something very, stable and predictable. The stock market, is always going to be your friend over a 10 or 20 year period. Why on earth would you want to put some money into something very risky? But what I've learned, Stephen, is people don't like that answer because they have this thing called FOMO. They feel like they're going to miss out on the next big thing. And so, if I'd said to Peter in the answer here, don't do it at all, allocate zero, the likelihood is that he'll probably change channels and we would like him to keep listening. So I think that there is maybe a happy medium, and that starting point is, if you're going to allocate some money to a very risky investment that you believe, you obviously don't just believe in the risk, you believe that it can deliver very good returns as well, then I think the first point is, if it can go to zero, whatever money you allocate, and if it goes to zero and it's not going to set you back financially, then that's a good measure. That is a starting point. I also think that you probably want to just check your debts. If you're sitting on credit cards, they cost you 25% a year. If you do nothing, your credit card, will double the debt against you within about 3 years. So just think about that, but before you do anything else, Peter. But if you're not in credit card debt and you want to take a punt, and I use that word on purpose, it is really a punt. Then make sure that it's no more than kind of 2 or 3%. And if it goes up 10 times and you allocated 3%, that means you've had a huge jump in your wealth in a very short period of time. And I would say, well done, you've rolled the dice and you were incredibly lucky. But I certainly wouldn't go and take 10 or 15% of my wealth or my assets and allocate it to something that's incredibly risky, because for me, I can't afford to lose 10 or 15% of my wealth. That would be devastating.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the reason people don't like it is that everyone thinks that they'll get it right, and virtually nobody does.
We always look back, so we'll look at NVIDIA and say, well, I don't want to miss out on NVIDIA's next doubling, and I don't want to miss out on, if it's crypto or whatever the thing is that's doing incredibly well now. And the truth is, those things are always obvious in hindsight. It's obvious that, AI is going to take over the world and NVIDIA is going to be the company that benefits most in the short term. But it's only obvious in hindsight. And so we all are geniuses once, if we want to talk about sports predictions, we're always a genius on Monday morning after the games have been played because we know the results. And it's the same with this. So you need to be very confident that you've done proper research, that you not just looking at the share price or the item's price and what it's done. Do you understand the driver of these things? And if you don't, the reality is you are gambling. And then make peace with that. You're actually taking a punt on something that you don't know very well because other people have taken a punt and they've been lucky, and now you don't want to miss out. And be honest with yourself and whoever else is involved in your life that we're taking a punt with our money and we might be blowing it.
All right, let's just very quickly return to the sandwich conversation where you're financially responsible for yourself, for the generation before you and the generation after you. A part of it, I imagine, is the conversations you have around that, and some of those conversations will almost certainly be quite difficult.
Very hard, and I suspect people are not having these conversations. It's very difficult to sit down and have a kind of a family meeting, which is what I think you should be doing in a situation like this. And, if you're a youngster entering the workplace, don't be embarrassed to show your family what your payslip looks like. Explain it to them and explain what all the deductions are, how much you've got left over. Show them what you spend on rent and show them what you spend on transport and show them what's left. And then say, okay, so this is what we've got to share. And remember, I've got to eat. I've also got to do certain things. So if you don't want to go to that extreme transparency, the reality is sitting the family down to say, I can afford to help. I can set aside 5,000 Rand a month. That is what I can afford. If you're asking for 10,000, I simply cannot do it. But I think understanding in a situation like this, it's very awkward, it's very uncomfortable. They might be very upset with you at the start when you say no. But if you just keep saying no without explanation, without some transparency, and without clear budgets and guidelines, we all operate with budgets. It's not a bad thing to say to whoever it is, this is way more than I can possibly afford. I don't earn, the huge salaries. And so if they understand, they can work with it as well. There's a very nice saying, to be clear is to be kind. And I think in this situation, to be very clear, very transparent is important. Set your boundaries and then learn to say no. And yes, you might feel a bit guilty, but when you're still helping those people in 10 years' time, that guilt will have gone away.
We've got 30 seconds left, but part of it might also be choices you make for your children. I mean, we all want to be able to send our kids for a tertiary education. That's expensive. There might be a better way.
I think it's something to look at now to say, if I can't afford super expensive private schools or universities, can I help fund my child, for example, to do an online university, and maybe they study part-time while they're working, they get a part-time job and they study part-time. Is that not an answer? Or can they do a 1-year course where they start earning an income immediately after that course and do something practical? So yes, they might not be, in society with a degree within 3 years. Maybe it takes 6. But if they're not in a hole and the family is not in a hole financially, is that not a better outcome for everybody?
Warren Ingram, thanks very much indeed, co-founder of Galileo Capital.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
Well, while we've been talking about some of the hard realities, U.S. markets, some of them again hitting record highs today after the JSE did as well. That is our interest rate expectations. The Dow Jones is up 1%, the Nasdaq up 1.2%, and the S&P also up 1% tonight. That's where we'll leave the U.S. markets this evening. We'll be back with you tomorrow on The Money Show. Plenty to look forward to, plenty coming on. And don't forget, our shapeshifter tomorrow is Nimrod and Bele. Looking forward to that conversation. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.